was a quiet Saturday morning. The sunlight was soft and golden, coming through the curtains and touching the small table near the window. The city outside was still calm. Only a few cars passed by, and the sound of their engines was distant and slow. I sat on my couch with a new book in my hands. I had been waiting to read it for a few days, maybe even a week. The cover was simple, a calm blue color with a small drawing of a tree in the middle. The title was written in white letters, and when I looked at it, I already felt something peaceful inside. I opened the first page and smelled the paper. It was one of my favorite smells, new paper, a little sharp and sweet at the same time I started reading. The story began slowly, describing a small town near the sea. The main character walked along the shore, listening to the wind and waves. The words were easy to read, but they created a deep feeling, as if I could almost hear the sound of the ocean too. After a few pages, I felt warm and relaxed. I looked out of the window. The sun was a little higher now, and the light had become brighter. I thought that this was a perfect morning for reading. But then I wanted something else, a cup of coffee. I put the book on my lap and stood up. The floor was cold, and it felt nice after sitting for so long. I went to the kitchen. The smell of coffee always made me happy. I filled the kettle with water and waited while it started to boil. The quiet sound of bubbling water was comforting. I opened the jar with coffee and breathed in its aroma, deep, strong, and a little bit sweet. Soon the water was ready. I poured it into my favorite cup, the white one with blue flowers on it, and added a little milk. The color of the coffee changed slowly, turning from dark brown to warm beige. I carried the cup back to the living room carefully, holding it with both hands so it wouldn't spill. I sat back down on the couch and reached for my book. But then I realized something. I didn't have a bookmark. I looked around. There was no piece of paper or card nearby. I could, of course, just fold the corner of the page, but I never liked doing that. I like to keep books clean and neat, as if they were small treasures. So I thought for a moment, maybe I could find something beautiful to use as a bookmark. I stood up again and went to my bookshelf. There, on the top shelf behind some notebooks, was a small paper box. It was light brown and looked a little old. When I opened it, I smiled immediately. Inside was a collection of old postcards, colorful, different sizes, some with bent corners, some still bright as new. I had almost forgotten about them. These postcards were from my school years. My classmates and friends sent them to me or brought them back from family trips. Every time someone went somewhere far, to another country or even another city, they would bring me a postcard. I used to keep them all. I loved the idea of having something small that carried a piece of another place. I sat down on the floor and began to look through them one by one. There were so many memories in that box. The first postcard I picked showed a beach with tall palm trees. On the back, I could see the handwriting of my school friend Anna. She wrote this one when her parents took her to Spain. I remembered how she told me later about the sea, how blue it was, and how she wanted to live near the water when she grew up. The next postcard was from a mountain town. There were snow-covered peaks and a small wooden house. It was from my classmate Dima. He wrote, "It's very cold here, but the sky is clear, and the stars look close." I smiled. That was so like him, always noticing the small details. Then I found one from Paris, the Eiffel Tower shining against a purple evening sky. It was from my cousin, who went there on a school trip. I could almost hear her voice telling me how she tried croissants for the first time and how she loved the sound of French everywhere around her. Each postcard was like a small door to another world. I felt warm inside, like I was traveling again through all those memories. At the bottom of the box, I found one that was different from the others. It was a little older, maybe from my early school years. The edges were soft and yellowish. The picture on it was beautiful, a drawing of a small street in Italy with colorful houses, flowers on balconies, and a cat sitting on the stairs. I looked at it for a long time. There was something peaceful about it, something that reminded me of summer afternoons and quiet joy. I decided that this postcard would be perfect for my book. It was simple, warm, and full of old memories, just like the stories I loved to read. I stood up, brushed the dust from my hands, and went back to the living room. My cup of coffee was still warm. I took a sip. The taste was smooth, slightly bitter, and comforting. Then I picked up my book again and opened it to the page where I had stopped reading. I carefully placed the postcard between the pages, making sure it fit nicely and didn't bend. It looked perfect there, the soft paper against the fresh white pages, a little piece of my past joining my present. I smiled and leaned back. I thought how wonderful it was that such small things, an old postcard, a cup of coffee, a quiet morning, could make life feel rich and full. I continued to read, and sometimes when I turned a page, I caught a glimpse of the postcard's corner and felt that same warm, nostalgic feeling again. The book, the coffee, the sunlight, and the quiet sounds of the world outside, all of it blended into one gentle moment that I wanted to remember. I continued reading my book. The words seemed softer now, maybe because my mind was full of memories. The story in the book talked about a woman who returned to her hometown after many years. She walked the same streets, looked at the same houses, and remembered her childhood. It was strange, but the story made me think about my own past, about school, my classmates, and all the small things I had almost forgotten. I realized that life moves so quickly. One moment you are a student, sitting in class and dreaming about the future, and the next moment you are an adult, drinking coffee and reading books on quiet weekends. I looked at the postcard again. It was beautiful and calm. I imagined the place from the picture. The small Italian street, the smell of flowers, the sound of people talking softly, maybe the music from an open window. I thought how nice it would be to travel somewhere like that again, not for work or hurry, but just to walk and look around. The light in the room changed slowly. The morning sunlight became brighter, then softer again as a few clouds moved across the sky. I felt that peaceful kind of happiness that comes when you are doing something simple, like reading a good story or drinking warm coffee. When I finished the first chapter, I closed the book and placed the postcard carefully between the pages. I ran my fingers along the edges of the card. Smooth, a little old, but strong. It felt good to touch something that had been part of my life for so long. I thought about my friends from school. Some of them I hadn't seen for years. I didn't even know where many of them lived now. Maybe some of them still had the postcards I gave them. Maybe they, too, kept them in a small box somewhere in their homes. The thought made me smile. I finished my coffee and looked around the room. Everything was quiet. The book lay on the table with the postcard inside it, the sunlight shining softly on the cover. It looked almost like a picture, still and perfect. Then a small idea came to me. What if I sent a postcard today? It had been so long since I wrote one. We all use messages now, quick text, emails, or photos on a phone. But a postcard is different. It travels slowly, like time itself. It carries your handwriting, your mood, and a small part of your day. I stood up and went back to the box. There were still many postcards left. Waiting, I looked through them and found one with a picture of my own city, the central square with the fountain and the old buildings. I decided to use it. I sat at my desk, took a pen, and thought for a moment. Then I began to write, not much, just a few lines. I didn't know exactly who I would send it to yet. I wrote slowly, trying to make my handwriting neat as I wrote. I felt something warm inside. It was nice to think about people from the past, about shared moments, laughter, and small stories that never disappear completely. The day was almost over. The sunlight on the wall turned orange and the shadows became longer. I opened the window a little, and the fresh air came in, carrying the smell of spring. Somewhere outside, a bird sang. I picked up my book again, opened it to the page with my new bookmark, and continued reading. The postcard between the pages was a quiet reminder. that sometimes the smallest things like old paper and old memories can bring the greatest comfort. And as the evening light filled the room, I thought that maybe I would start collecting postcards again, not for travel or decoration, but as small stories of life, each one a bookmark.